welcome to Property Matters here on Dublin South FM. You can contact the show on social media at iPropertyRadio or indeed email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host for today is myself, Carol Tallon, and I'm delighted to be joined by Rosie Webb, Senior Architect at Limerick City and County Council and Head of Urban Innovation. Now, Rosie, I'm so delighted to be joining you today because we've known each other now for a little while. I'm so excited about the work you're doing in Limerick. So I'm delighted we have an opportunity to explore it today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks very much for having me.
Rosie, Senior Architects in Limerick City and County Council. So obviously that's a role that people will be familiar with. Head of Urban Regeneration. What does that look like? What is your job?
Well, as a senior architect, unusually, I work in the economic development department. And I came in really with the brief of looking at the revitalization of particularly the city centre and the historic towns. So my job, the section that I set up, which is actually called Urban Innovation, is a new section that was set up because we were successful in getting a couple of large funding streams that were targeted on the Georgian neighbourhood. So the department is a kind of multidisciplinary team. So we have myself, I have another architect there, I have a number of planners, I have an energy engineer, and then we have people who are working as kind of collaboration managers. So it's a new kind of a department, a new kind of service the local authorities is engaged in.
Well, obviously there's some great work being done because I was actually speaking to a property consultant based in Dublin a couple of weeks ago for the show, and he talked about how Limerick could become the centre of sustainability on the smart city side of things in Ireland. And I thought that was so exciting. So there's quite a bit of buzz about one programme that you're operating in particular, the Smart City Exchange. So you might just give us a little bit of background about that?
Yep. So the City Exchange project is a European funded project, and it's called the Horizon 2020 project. And Limerick is really the first city to be a lighthouse city under that program. And the program is really about creating a positive energy block in the city. And then hopefully rolling that out to the district level and to the city and the whole world. And really what happens is you have kind of two cities who start, a number of cities that follow, and then the idea is more about replication, how we do it in other places.
Well, and that's so important because when we talk about innovation, not everywhere is going to get the funding. The funding that is so vital to be able to try things and allow things to potentially fail so that you can learn from them and try more things. What's really interesting here is that you're doing it not on new properties. And that's where we've seen a lot of the energy initiatives happening in cities and around city blocks at the moment. It's been on new buildings. So you're actually going into very old buildings. How is that working?
Yeah, it's very challenging, Carol. I won't lie. It is very challenging, partially because, obviously there's the inherent aspects of trying to get the old fabric of the buildings up to the new energy ratings, but also because you're working with a lot of different properties, a lot of different property owners. And one of the issues with historic buildings is that the property ownership becomes fragmented. And so really what we're trying to do is to get people to work together, to enable groups of people working together. So that's very difficult. I often say to people, it's a bit like, it's not like asking you to lose 10 pounds. It's like you saying, Carol, you have to make me lose 10 pounds. So what you're trying to do is activate and enable people to work that way. But what I would say about the historic structure is that it is inherently energy efficient. Just the kind of high density, sort of 6-story high terraced block is actually quite a sustainable form. And the Georgian neighborhood in particular was built in this kind of logical grid system that always took into account the energy needs. So there were a lot of people don't know this, but under the streets of Georgian Limerick and Georgian Dublin, there are vaults that would have been where coal would have been delivered. And obviously, fireplaces and people would have filled those in. Or that's how the building would have worked technologically. And now we're trying to kind of repurpose that logic into the kind of new energy systems. So interestingly, in its form, it's very energy efficient. And I think once we can kind of crack the way of getting people to work together, it would be very easy to kind of bring that all up to speed very quickly.
See, I would imagine that given the given the focus on not just climate action at the moment, but also actually in revitalising our city centres, this would seem on paper like an easy sell, but obviously all of these come at a cost. So in terms of getting all of the individual property owners to work together, how difficult was that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a continuing difficulty, but one of the ways that we're tackling this is because we've set up a kind of one-stop shop. We've been fortunate enough to have a tax incentive that's active in that neighborhood. So the Living City initiative is active there, and so we've been able to kind of make it easier for people to do all of the statutory work. So we have a one-stop shop in which we get everybody together at one place at the same time. So we have our conservation officer, our planner, our fire officer, ourselves talking about the tax incentive. We can then, kind of tell people all at once what they have to do. They also have a face, a name, a person that they can contact. And then we begin to build up relationships with people, and we can kind of do some matchmaking when we see there are things, say, within a block that makes sense. So we're kind of at that now. Last week, we had this City Engage Week. We've just taken on 24 energy champions. So different people from property owners to just people who are interested, who might not even live in the area, focusing on things from as various as renovating the properties to learning how to become a prosumer, to learning maybe taking on some, let's say, e-mobility solutions themselves. And I think trying to kind of broadcast that out and let people get in touch with each other really is how that works.
And the block that you're dealing with at the moment, what is that made up of? Is it a mix of residential, commercial?
Yeah, so the positive energy block is 5 buildings. Mm-hmm. So it's our kind of anchor tenant is Gardens International, and that's a LEED Gold Standard building that was recently done up by Limerick 2030, our development company. And then there are 4 other participating buildings in that: the post office, Rooney's Auctioneers, the Chamber of Commerce, and the youth services, the Limerick Youth Services. So together, all of those buildings have to generate more energy than they're consuming, and they're assisted by doing that by being part of a community grid.
District heating is something that's been explored a lot in Ireland. We're seeing a project being talked about using waste heat coming from data centres, say in Tala. Have we an example of it working in Ireland yet?
I'm not too sure, Carol. On our project, we're using. It's really more of a virtually created exchange of energy. We are intending to put in a river turbine that will form part of the energy. Of course, part of the energy will be from actually just saving energy in each of the buildings, so retrofitting, but also trying to install as much PV panels as we can. And then the energy storage works through a community grid, which is a virtual system. So we have a digital twin of the area, and we have an energy company called Smart Empower working on how that let's say that energy gets exchanged and how people might get the benefit of that energy. We don't have a particular district heating system in it, but we definitely think it is something that, it will be one of the solutions going forward for climate change. Like, we've recently designated that area and a slightly larger area that includes the Colbert Station quarter as a decarbonization zone. And we think one of the key projects that we need to look at there is how we could enable something like a district heating system.
Okay. Your role is a particularly interesting one because we are starting to see the emergence of smart city departments with different focus, and positive energy would be one side of that. But you're actually involved in urban regeneration as well. And I know that's a word that, has really fallen out of favor amongst communities. And I think that I don't think that's an Irish condition. I think it's a global condition. So you refer to it as urban revitalisation. But, we have this prevailing problem in city centres and indeed in town centres of dereliction. Has this been an issue for Limerick?
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons we decided to target this area, is because we knew in the Georgia neighborhood we had a lot of dereliction and vacancy. So we did a kind of survey before we started. There was a city centre health check, and in this area, which is I suppose we've defined the area because it had most of the historic buildings. And I think there's a link there, right? So there's about 23 city blocks, and that area is about something like 35 hectares. So there's about 2,400 people living in there. And within that area, we identified that there's something like 900 buildings there, but we had 92 fully vacant buildings in 2018. And so we knew this was a problem, and we knew that, there needs to be a proactive approach to it. So like I said, we've done this kind of carrot and stick approach where we're putting out derelict notices, but then we're also letting people know about the tax incentive, giving them some help. And we had an update to that survey, and we found that we've had a 27% reduction in vacancy in those fully vacant buildings. There could be additional vacancy that's being dealt with in buildings that were half vacant, or just the upper floors vacant. So we think that's a good indicator that we're having an impact.
27% is huge, but what is the makeup of that? Who's coming into the area, or is it people consuming more space?
No, it's interesting. We have so those are all quite small developments, and that's also, I think, one of the issues, Carol, is it's micro development. You know what I mean? You're talking about sort of individual Georgian buildings. So each of those buildings, and we've had everything from, we have a number of people doing single family homes, people developing kind of executive residences, 1 and 2 bed apartments and studios. We also have a kind of, it's been very interesting to see the kind of innovation, creativity in that kind of development area. We've managed to allow, kind of, I suppose, activate some of the buildings ourselves with our own social housing. So we have a housing first scheme that Peter McVerry Trust are doing in 2 of the properties, which were previously owned by the OPW. So it's interesting. It was just really trying to get in touch with them. We also have a developer who's very actively working in putting together people who want the tax incentive with let's say, long-term rental options. So again, Peter McVerry Trust will be supporting a local developer to use the tax incentive to do up a couple of those buildings. And we think that we can also pivot that now into affordable. So this morning, the Affordable Housing Act is coming forward. So we think there'll be big opportunities to do that sort of creative combination for things like affordable housing or key worker housing. And then we're also really interested in looking at some new models ourselves. So we're actively looking at the area of community-led housing, which is very new to Ireland, isn't being done. But how can we empower communities themselves to become developers and managers of properties in the long term? So we're looking at that. It's very difficult, Carol, because there isn't really I think let's say the legislative and the regulatory environment isn't quite there yet. So we're looking at kind of stepped approaches to these things. But yes, there's it's very much micro development, and maybe what we think is that if we can get 2 property owners working together, that's a much better solution. And I suppose if you think about the way, the Georgian area was speculative when it was built, in the 1780s, and people would have built sort of 2 or 3 properties together and then broken them up and sold them as family homes. And it's almost as if you need to do that reassembling of property, with these various property owners to get them working together.
I think it's very positive that you're looking at this beyond the scope of what local authorities can do, and really looking at the role that individual property owners have to play, and indeed developers. In terms of new models, I think, the more I explore, I have a lot of partnerships working with organisations outside of Ireland across a number of different continents. And one of the things I've seen is that, we are quite focused, a narrow focus in what we think works. And, that's largely attributable to how things get funded as well. So when you talk about community-led housing, what do you mean? Sorry, just to explain, because I don't understand the concept of community-led housing or what that might look like in Ireland. Do we have a picture of it working successfully somewhere else, so we can say, okay, this is a model that might work for Ireland?
Yeah, it's been very much working recently in London. And I think it was something that the Greater London Authority set up really to address the issue of affordable housing. And the way that they have done it is that they have set up these community hubs. And so they do have these groups that, give professional assistance and make small seed funding to local groups to be able to develop these projects from the bottom up, if you like. And they also have done something which is very interesting, is they set up a small sites portal. So they are able to, find these small sites that are either derelict or vacant, or people might even donate into the small sites portal that allows kind of small developers and small groups of let's say community-led housing groups to come together to make proposals for them. So it's very much it's a kind of a new thing, I think, in the UK, but probably most active in the last 5 years, because there was a Localism Act passed there, and that kind of, I suppose, made it a little bit more compulsory, I suppose, to begin to address these sort of things. We haven't had that sort of a top-down, let's say, I suppose, instigation of it here, but there's certainly an interest in it. And I think there's a number of, let's say, research projects that are being funded through the Housing Agency, and our own project through the Department of Housing and Planning and local government, that have enabled us to kind of figure out how to do that here. And I think that's where we'd like to be a part of that effort.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to put it in the context of tapping into smaller sites or underused space. It's something that we've seen certainly across London. 20 years ago and longer, London was absolutely taking a head start on this. They were taking the lead. I remember one of the underground Victorian bathrooms in Crystal Palace nearly 20 years ago converted into a one-bed apartment. We actually worked with a local authority here to see if a similar approach could be taken. And we actually ran a competition that was where we got the community to actually report underused or unused sites in the city centre. And it was so interesting what we got, because we wanted people to be creative. So we were getting things like derelict handball alleys, and there was a lot of CIE ground, like under bridges and things like this. But it was really interesting to tap in. And, this was coming from looking at London and how not just, these Victorian underground bathrooms, but also things like, at the time they were putting sleeper carriages, old train carriages on city rooftops to create live-work units and things like that. And this is genuinely going back more than a decade and a half ago. And there was such a sense of excitement about how a city could be opened up, how underused space could be reimagined. And there was a number of different initiatives, particularly around Dublin. I'm not so sure about Limerick. And everything ran into policy problems. There was issues with everything. We couldn't get engineers to sign off on buildings that would allow, flat top buildings that would allow any sort of structure on top. And just, there seems to be a lot of systemic challenges to innovation. And so obviously as head of urban innovation, how are you getting around, policy issues like that?
It's interesting that, Carol, you mentioned that, and we are actually working with one of our companies in the City Exchange project, is Space Engagers, who did a similar project here, where they ran they had an app where people could report dereliction and vacancy, and we're working with them now in a whole system. I suppose it's an innovation ecosystem that we're establishing through the City Exchange project. And really what we do is we try to work with, let's say, local groups, but also communities of interest and innovators and, makers and all kinds of people like that, to try to come up with solutions. So we're setting up a citizen innovation lab. And we have let's say the Georgian neighborhood is designated as an innovation playground. And really what that allows us to do is to test out sort of new solutions together with the regulators. And so, for instance, the first version of that will be, the exchange of energy. So, for instance, you can't sell energy back to the grid now under our regulations. We're working with the CRU and also ESB, who are our partners on this, and ESB Innovate, to figure out how you would do that. How do you protect consumers in a situation like that? And so we're sort of a test bed. And so we're sort of setting ourselves up as the city itself becoming a living lab where people can test out solutions. And so we have we run an open call that people can come forward with solutions. In our first open call that we had, which was focused on laneways, we worked with a startup company called StreetSeek, who wanted to put in kind of citizen sensors to begin to measure things like footfall, air quality, that sort of thing. And interestingly, when we put that in, that was just about the time that COVID struck. So they had these sensors in, and what was interesting is that they could through that measure how well people were doing their social distancing, which is something they hadn't predicted when they started. We're also supporting a company called Safecility through an SBIR program to look at solutions for fire safety in these old buildings. And the solution coming forward is very much a smart tech solution, which is, the idea of, how buildings could certify themselves, and how we might use that system to be a sort of in-between person between the let's say the regulatory landscape and let's say the property owner themselves, so that you get this service in between that helps people to report on compliance. So we definitely think that that those kind of digital systems, so both the digital twin that we have, but also these, let's say these mapping platforms, these processes that allow people to kind of propose solutions and then test them out together with these companies, is kind of essential to kind of bringing those kind of figuring out what the price we need. And then just that thing that you're talking about, Carol, how does it get through a regulatory system? Or more importantly, how does the regulatory system change to enable those things? So that I think it's a process-led thing, and it has to involve all these actors. It has to involve the local authority, these innovators themselves, but also the people who use it. So I think that's the real, let's say, differentiator, is that we're trying to involve the people themselves who will use it. We're also involving all the academic, so our partners are UL and this project, but we're also working with the other third level institutions and trying to set up new training solutions. So one of the things we've discovered is that there's a real mismatch between historic properties and people who do up buildings for energy. So if you find someone who knows how to do up a historic property, which is very particular way of doing it up because they have a different kind of construction than new cavity wall construction, they don't seem to know a lot about energy upgrades. And likewise, if you call someone in to do the energy upgrades to your old building, they will know very little about, historic properties and how they need to be done up. So we're now kind of targeting, let's say training programs around this for both professionals and tradesmen. We're not doing it ourselves. We're working with the people who do that already. The Heritage Council, the let's say the local institutes of technology. So we're really this kind of, let's say, in between. We're kind of enabler and kind of activator that's our role in this. And it's important, I think, that the local authority does that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, you mentioned there about your work with one particular PropTech startup and on the fire and safety systems there and how that was actually managed under the SBIR program. The SBIR program is such an important one because one of the things that I've mentioned to you previously, and one thing I've been very vocal about, is that PropTech, not just PropTech, obviously that's my interest, but startups, when trying to work with local authorities to innovate. And by the way, I think that local authorities, much like established businesses, they need the innovation coming from startups who are exploring these interesting things. However, our public procurement process have been really weighted against these startups because while they're innovating something new, they clearly don't have the experience to qualify under public procurement and tendering processes. So it's been a really interesting dynamic to see how startups can work successfully, particularly with any state agencies, and actually be in a position then to deliver paid services. So I think the SBIR is probably one of the models that seems to be working. So just before we finish up today, you might just explain, maybe if there's any innovators here who are at quite early stages of their business and therefore feel they mightn't be big enough to approach a local authority. I presume you're very open to early stage startups who have interesting ideas, maybe that have yet to be proven. Maybe the testing environment or the playground essentially would be a good setup for them. Is there a process by which they can contact you and get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I was talking about this innovation ecosystem that we've set up. We run these City Engage weeks. At the moment, they are focused purely on the positive energy block because they're sponsored through the city exchange program. But we hope to sustain that and really designating it as part of the decarbonization zone, looking at the wider kind of climate change issues. Mm-hmm. And the way that works is we run these City Engage weeks. They have a number of activities that happen. We run those twice a year. And the idea of those City Engage weeks is to determine to get some ideas for what might be the topic of the next open call. So that's followed up by an open call. At the moment, we have small pots of money. We have 20 grand to run 3 of those. So the first one, we had 5 companies that we supported. They each got 5 grand. And they weren't just companies, they were also community groups. And we asked them to team up as groups. And then the last one that we've had was focused on renewable energy. So again, we're actually supporting 6 groups in that. So we'll be doing another one. So we have a program of these open calls that we will be ramping up and continuing to do over the next number of years. So absolutely, I mean, certainly anyone can contact us at urbaninnovation@limerick.ie. You can go on to limerick.ie, our website, and if you look in the Georgian neighborhood, you can contact us through there. And that also sets up the program for these City Engage weeks. So that's, I think, the way to kind of feed into the ideas of how the next open call. So you were talking about procurement, Carol, and I think, competitions are procurement. Do you know what I mean? And so these are small scale competitions that help to begin that process where anyone can come in, and they actually get supported both financially and through our assistance to try to kind of target that innovation where it's best placed, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's it's a good system. And I'm so happy to see actually the playing field being somewhat leveled so that startups can actually get involved. So thank you so much for all the amazing work that you're doing. How can people follow along with the project? Particularly I think the Positive Energy District, I think that's one that towns all around Ireland will be watching just to be able to learn from it. So are the updates being shared publicly, or how can people follow along?
Yeah, so if they go to limerick.ie and if you put in City Exchange, you'll find our page that you can follow. So you can join onto that and follow the City Exchange progress.
Super. Thanks a million. That was Rosie Webb, Senior Architect at Limerick City and County Council and Head of Urban Innovation. We need to take a quick break. Stay tuned.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. So now I'm joined by Keith Ryan, co-founder and CEO of ScanQue. Keith, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I can already tell by your background that you're in a slightly warmer location than Ireland.
Indeed, Carol, and thanks for having me on as well. I've been in Tenerife for the last 7 months, and so unfortunate I've been on lockdown here with everything has been open. So very blessed to be here in a warm climate, and please God, when things lift up, we can go back to countries that be like back home in Ireland and even back home to London as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So London is your base ordinarily, although I think most people will tell the Irish accent.
Absolutely, yeah. Waterford by birth and lived in Cork for many years, and then 7 years ago moved to London to bring this vision and dream to life.
Very good. Well, look, let's talk about this vision and this dream. So I mentioned there you're the co-founder and CEO of ScanQue. So what is ScanQue?
So basically where the name even derived from is, I come from the cleaning industry, and Carol, I've been involved in the industry all my life. And where ScanQue came from and the idea and the concept was 7 years ago, I just got very disillusioned with the industry because such was the variance on how people price contracts or companies price contracts, in the extremities from very expensive to actually not making any margin, and even in some cases losing money just to win the contract, So the brainchild was for me to identify, could existing surveying 3D scanning technology that you would see on construction sites, could they be brought internally to digitally map the twin of the building? And of course they could. Now what ScanQue is doing is we are not reinventing the wheel with scanning technology. We are piggybacking off of the back of it to identify the measurements that come from a 3D scan, which is exacting to 99.9%. So with a lot of the time and motion studies that I've done within the cleaning industry, Carl, it's linking those algorithms to the exacting measurement to give the exact time for the cleaning task. So to build on the back of that as well, what we're doing with our technology, which is going to be the first of its kind globally, we are machine learning object recognition, and we're auto detecting measurements of floors, and we're also identifying the different floor surfaces from machine learning. So that's what's very exciting for me, is to bring the science behind our industry. And there has never been a scientific approach to how contracts are priced. So it is very exciting for us our vision is to become the global benchmark and the first company through science and technology to achieve this.
Okay, that's an exciting one, Keith. But how big is this problem? Because I'm conscious that you're saying that, you became disillusioned by this, 7 years ago. So I'm thinking back 7 years ago, you had probably just come through the crash and the early years of recovery. And so what we saw back then was a lot of pricing across, certainly across all sectors of the construction industry. So I'm sure facilities management was quite similar, where we saw a lot of underpricing happening just so that people could keep their teams and keep going. And obviously, we saw with some companies that the strategy backfired with catastrophic impact. Mm. So I'm trying to think of the environment that you were in when you were thinking about this. How big a problem was it?
Yeah, within the industry, it has always been super, super competitive, Carol. High volume, low margin business, the cleaning industry is globally, and it's always been driven down by the corporates. And, for the technology that we're looking to develop, we want to make it visible and transparent in what we're demonstrating to how it's priced, and actually achieving some sustainable margins for the cleaning industry, because a lot of it is subjective as to how these contracts are being priced and how it's sold. And a lot of the times, good salubrious cleaning companies sell the dream extremely well. But then operationally, it falls down because it can't be delivered upon because it wasn't priced accurately in the first place. Okay. So this is what we're looking to bring.
Very good. And I understand that for the last number of years, you've been on the technology side, but I presume the people that you're selling into, they're still working on the ground. And, over the past year, 14 months, how has this industry changed? Because again, when we're looking at contract cleaning for commercial properties, we're talking about a lot of workplaces. Now, obviously, workplaces have meant something different in the last 12 to 14 months. But how has the approach to cleaning changed? Because we're seeing more laser technology coming in. What's changed over the past 14 months?
Yeah, it's a great question, Carol, because I do believe in the event with the advent of COVID, this has shone a fantastic positive light on the cleaning industry, whereas before it was seen by a lot of people as a nice to have, but now it's seen as a necessity for healthy and sustainable buildings to look after the people's welfare and their health whilst they're at work. And within our benchmarking assessments, what we're actually building in is COVID touchpoint cleaning throughout the daytime for the corporates, and giving the cleaning companies the visibility into the corporates as well and how that's delivered. So apart from us wanting to become a accurate global benchmark within cleaning, we're also factoring in COVID touchpoint assessments for sanitization protocols throughout the daytime as well.
Can you I haven't heard that expression before, COVID touchpoint. What does that mean? What does that look like for, people? I'm conscious at the moment that, our audience is primarily one across the planning, construction, property and PropTech sectors. And facilities management is one that, similar to what how you described contract cleaning, it's a high volume, low margin. And at the moment, asset managers are really under pressure, as are employers, how to safely bring their teams back into the workplace. Some jurisdictions are further ahead of us in this, but in Ireland, this is an issue that people are tackling, today, this week, this month. So how, what are COVID touchpoint and what does that mean for facilities management and for employers?
Good point, Carol. And not only is it an Irish problem, but it's a global problem. And, so previously you would have cleaning regimes for cleaning surfaces. And of course, it's going to be factored in a slightly higher time because you're actually cleaning, whereas now you're just disinfecting. So it's a spray of the surface rather than a clean. So there's going to be some less cleaning time with involved in the regimes. And it's very important from a hygiene perspective that, each specific client will have different needs on having some certain touch points done, like handles of doors for entering buildings, so forth, reception desks and so forth as well, security gates, and other touch points like the touch button on lifts as well. Mm-hmm. So this is what we're bringing, very granular level of cleaning tasks, sanitization tasks into the cleaning regime on the benchmark.
Okay, and I know from the context of PropTech Ireland that we're seeing a huge increase in touchless technology. So we're seeing more contactless, whether it's for elevators or entry and exit from buildings, so that you won't have to have these touch points. So we're seeing technology become very prevalent, but that's in newer buildings. Older buildings, while they can of course be retrofitted, that's not all going to happen. In the next year, in the next 2 years. How are we seeing technology change your industry, though? Because I obviously we want to touch on the algorithm that your company has developed, but on a broader, kind of taking a broader view, how has the contract cleaning industry been impacted by technology?
It's very interesting for me, Carol, because, I came to London, as I said, 7 years ago, and it took me nearly 4 years to bring the concept and vision to life. And of course, the cleaning industry, you could say, is very cynical in embracing new technology per se. And after those 4 years, when I did get ScanQue off the ground, the industry was very reluctant to embrace what we were looking to bring, the concept and the vision, the proof of concept of the algorithms, the scanning technology. And last year, within our projects that we delivered, out of the 11 projects, 10 of them were driven by the corporates, which is very interesting to note. So the corporates do have the agenda to drive technology and provide the visibility, transparency and accuracy into pricing. So of course, when we pitched in what we were looking to do, they very much took it on board. And I'm delighted to say, Carol, this year alone, we flipped it completely on its head. Now we're working with 1 or 2 global cleaning organizations, and we're also working with some of the UK's leading cleaning companies also in delivering the technology of the concept of what we're looking to achieve. So it's becoming really exciting. So we do believe with this technology, the corporates will have our technology to keep their contractors honest in us benchmarking their services. Mm-hmm. And then from the cleaning company's perspective as well, benchmarking by an independent company to keep them also honest and giving them the visibility and transparency into their clients. So we believe it's a double-sided coin for us in that both the corporates and the cleaning industry can benefit from our technology.
Yeah, I'm delighted to hear that you are getting that market traction, because we speak to startups every week here, and one of the things we know is that 4 years is not a long time to go from concept to market traction. With companies that would take a lot longer than that. So from that point of view, well done, because I understand the challenge in getting it that far. So that's amazing news. But just so that I understand, what are the consequences of this not being done properly? So say for the industry, what are the consequences of contracts not being priced right, whether they're being overpriced or underpriced? Why is that a problem?
The problem has always been is the credibility of our sector, because of the variance as well. And, it pretty much goes around in a circle. They'll take on a new contractor, they're sold a dream. It has problems from the get-go. They renegotiate and it's fixed for 6 months, and then it falls down again. And it comes back down to, for me, the key fundamental is because the margins are so low. Mm-hmm. Inadvertently, some cleaning companies will not make up the surplus of lost hours for whatever reason, be it employee absenteeism or unused holidays and so forth as well, to make that little bit of percentage extra margin on top. And I do believe, if the corporates should take this into account when they're deciding on different cleaning companies as to the margin, they are giving on the contract, because what I want to achieve for the industry globally is to make and show the visibility of sustainable profit margins for different types of contracts within different sectors within the industry.
Okay, I'm conscious when you started thinking about this 7 years ago, the scanning technology was in use, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So for example, today every new building being developed, I would say the vast majority of them will be handed over together with a digital twin of the building. So that's certainly not true of older buildings. However, we do know that in the longer term, every physical asset will need to have its digital asset to provide for good facilities management. So 7 years ago, that wasn't the situation. The algorithm you've designed, can that work against any digital twin of a building?
Yes, for any scanning technology that's out there. And we're using different types. The different types that are out there is the Matterport scanning technologies. There's Leica, there's BLK2Go, and there's Navis. And we're actually trying all out these different scanning technologies because we want our platform to integrate into these different technologies. So the algorithm still does link to them, because each scan, also getting a little bit technical now, provides a point cloud data of which we map the automation piece in our technology from the scan.
Okay, and I suppose just so that I'm clear, it's good that you have the facilities to be able to do that if you're going in to price a job. But if you're going in to price a job on a building that already has a digital twin, does that mean you don't need to do any scanning? You can just work off the digital twin and give accurate pricing on that. So then in terms of the AI that your own company is developing for to identify objects within a building, where does that sit? How is that relevant here?
Yeah, it's a great question, Carol, and it basically leads into the automation piece of what we're looking to achieve. So, large contracts typically can vary between 1 month to 12 months, even to 2 years to price. And with our technology, once our platform is built at the end of the year, you will be able to go onto our site and download the link to our platform. And in minutes, it will give you the benchmark results with the cool 3D visuals that you already get within the scanning technology. So from bringing, pricing contracts from months to minutes, it's a game changer for the industry. And this is where our machine learning and AI plays a huge part, because we are identifying desks, tables and chairs, PC monitors, keyboards, even mouses, light switches in a room, room temperature control units. So the level of granularity, because within a scan, every building has a specific DNA to that building. And currently within the industry at the moment is, just say, for example, there was 2 buildings, 100,000 square feet. Typically, they would be priced for the same amount of cleaning hours. My issue has always been, Carl, the DNA in those 2 buildings are always going to be completely different. Mm-hmm. So, and how can the cleaning time be exactly the same? It ain't ever. It's going to be different. It's going to be some extra for the one building and less in the other building. So this is where the brainchild of the scan, which you're getting the specific DNA from every building to accurately price that contract, is what we're bringing to the industry.
And then in terms of global benchmarking, that's a huge ambition. So what kind of data do you need to be able to deliver on that?
Yeah, and Carol, within our benchmarking and the pilots that we're doing at the moment, we are and have done pilots in APAC. We have done them in the States. We have done them in the Nordics, and we've done them from Europe as well. So with all of the different parts of the world, we are developing the data sets with the more projects we do. And the more we do, the further fine-tuned the benchmark will become as well, because, it's accepted as well within the cleaning industry globally. There is a level of pace that you work at, which is between 1 is to 5, So in Europe, the pace is that you work at is set at 3, which is the normal pace of work. And it's accepted within the Nordics that they work more productively, and they work between 3.5% to 4%. And down in APAC, it's accepted that they do work less productively, and it's roughly 1.5 to 2. So a lot less productive. So within our benchmark as well, Carol, we factor in the ratings of the pace that each of those operatives work to as well. So again, it's another unique function that we are bringing to the table. It's not something new, but we're factoring it in with the benchmark. And then also, Carol, within our benchmark also, and it's another global first, we are factoring in the work times that you work at between tasks as well. So, some of the projects we've done recently, there's 1 hour and 42 minutes a day work time. And for some contracts, that can be the tipping point, whether a cleaning contract is profitable or not. So, and again, by us factoring this equation into the working time between cleaning tasks, it's bringing a vision or, a level of granularity that's new to the industry that people have never seen, which, of course, when, if I was a cleaning company provider and I was demonstrating to my client that I was factoring in the working time between cleaning tasks, and also factoring in the setup time when you start for work every day, 10 minutes, and also the close off time, which is 5 minutes per operative as well. It's 3 elements: the cleaning algorithms, the work time between cleaning tasks, and the setup and finish time as well.
That's amazing. Is it too early to ask? And I'm sorry, I know we have to finish up, but I'm really fascinated about this because this is one of the areas across facilities management that we haven't seen innovating. And the fact that you can take a task that was manually taking months and reduce it to minutes. I mean, that's the goal of digital transformation. That's the goal of introducing technologies to industries like this. So then being able to benchmark, I actually think that you're potentially opening up so many other areas for other property technology startups to piggyback on what you're doing then, because you're going to be opening up all of these little key areas of opportunity. But in terms of where you're at the moment, do you have data yet? Have you been able to show findings on, any particular big any big projects? Do you have case studies at this stage, or is it too early?
Yes, we have many case studies, and on average, we are showing cost savings, Carol, 10% and above within the benchmark.
That's huge. What's the margin? What's the margin for, what would be the typical margin on this business?
Like if you had a £500,000 contract annually, you were talking 3-4% profit margin on that contract. So it's quite low per se.
Yeah. So that's, so 10% of that is significant.
Correct.
Okay.
It is.
Look, it's really interesting. It's really interesting stuff. And, and I'm sorry, we need to kind of finish up here, because I think actually, again, you're opening up so many other areas of opportunity that I think other technology providers will be able to come in and give tweaks on that. In terms of next steps of innovation for ScanQue, what are you looking at next in terms of innovation?
Yeah, it's so interesting, Carl, because on our roadmap, on the immediate future is asset tracking from a scan. And we know there's only 1 or 2 globally doing it at the moment, and it's on our roadmap to build out that module as well. But not only that, because when you have this scan data, you have all of, the internal of the building, of the twin. So we can do workspace utilization. We are going to tag on HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, the lifestyle project from a scan. What else? Painting and decorating. We know the surface measurement of the wall. We attach the amount of paint that it needs to the wall, the amount of time that it takes the painter to paint it, and put the overhead costs in there as well. So that, mechanical and electrical. So there's 8 other modules that we're going to build on in the platform. And of course, we're going to bring in the industry expertise to the platform when we're building each of those modules as well. So it's really exciting times, and says me,
our platform will have so many different revenue generating models. If there's any investors out there listening, yes, we're looking for money. We're happy to talk to them.
Yeah, no, look, I think it's a really interesting one. And given the challenges of pricing jobs across all spectrum, I can see that the model is one that can work far outside of the sector you've designed it for, which again is always the pinnacle of innovation and transformation when we're looking at that. In fact, actually just earlier today, I was having a conversation with somebody, about the whole spheres of innovation. Across it all, it tends to fall into 3 buckets. And those buckets are, you can innovate the product or the service, you can innovate how you're delivering it, or you innovate the business model underpinning it. And if you can innovate the business model underpinning it, this is where you see the really transformative change. Yes. And that's what I think you're touching on here. So it's definitely going to be an exciting one to watch. So Keith, thank you so much for joining us today, and continued success for the business. It's great that you're building it in London. Obviously, we would have loved if you had been in a position, if the ecosystem was developed enough to build it in Ireland. It's a challenge that we have, and it's one that we're genuinely working to address. But thank you so much. That was Keith Ryan, co-founder and CEO of ScanQue. And that's it from us this week. Thank you for listening to Property Matters on Dublin South FM. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iPropertyRadio, or indeed email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. My thanks to Peter Rice on sound. We're back at the same time next week. From myself, Carol Talon, and all the team here, stay safe.